Shivang, you're based in Mumbai as well, right?
Yeah, so I'm based in Mumbai.
Okay, great. Any update on Siddharth? Is he had to go to the hospital? Is he okay?
Yeah, so actually, I think he had to admit the person to the hospital. So he was just arranging all the things for them. So he was like, I
Sure,
want.
sure.
So he sent his apologies again for this.
No problem at all. Absolutely understand. I think the cases are really on the rise again, and we all just have to take care. All of us have let our guard down a bit.
Yeah, and in Mumbai specifically, it's been a little too loose in the last 2 3 weeks. So I think hopefully this is a wake up call for everyone over here, and people start taking it seriously.
Yeah, obviously Nagpur's gone back into lockdown, but the thought of Mumbai going back into lockdown is scary.
I think Mumbai lockdown will be a disaster for a lot of people.
Yeah,
Things will probably go back 2 3 months from where they came up.
yeah. No, and we'll talk about Everest business coming up. I think it's been very interesting as we look at different shared mobility providers. I actually think that your business is one of the few that have recovered almost to 80-90% of pre-COVID levels. The same has not happened with other mobility platforms.
Right. So we've seen a 75 80% recovery so far, but the next real kicker for a business like Everest is going to be travel and entertainment coming back. So that's something that we are waiting for.
Yeah.
Fingers are crossed. So far, the recovery has surpassed everyone's expectations. So that's been a big positive and a big relief for a lot of people. Keeping our fingers crossed for now.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Um, to everyone who's joined us, we'll just wait for a few minutes before we formally kick off the session. You should expect us to start around 5:05. Thank you.
So,
Hey Abhilash, hi.
Hi, Nikhil.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining in.
Sure, no problem.
We are just going to give a few more minutes for having the audience join us, and then we'll get started.
Okay.
In the meantime, I want to introduce to you Shivang from Everest Fleet. As you
Mhm.
know, we're doing a combo deal with both VGOT and Everest. And Shivang Abhilash is the founder of VGOT, which is a water management solution. Um,
Mhm.
we were trying to think of common things or a common theme to this conversation between you and Everest, and we couldn't think of anything, right? And hence the common thing became how diversified this is as an investment opportunity. So we'll talk a little bit about that once we get started.
Okay.
Okay, gentlemen. I think we have a fairly large number of people who have tuned in. Let's get started while a few more may join us. First of all, thank you again for taking time on a Saturday evening to be with us. I think this webinar creates a great opportunity for our users and our investors to hear directly from founders and from CXOs about the companies that they're leasing to, as well as some of the opportunities and risks of making that investment. Um, we'll we'll keep the session where I'll pose some questions to you, but I also want to make sure that towards the end of the session, we give 20-25 minutes to any questions that may come from the attendees. Yeah. Um, Shivang, if we could maybe just start with you, introduction about yourself as well, what the company does, what Everest Street does, and then Abhilash, I'd love for you to answer the same thing.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Nikhil, Vivek, for having us here. So it's a great opportunity for Everest to present to a platform like Grip and the large investor community that you all have. And secondly, just wanted to apologize on Siddharth's behalf that he couldn't make it here. There was a medical emergency at his family. So he sends his apologies to everyone. So coming to myself, so I come from a finance background. I have done my bachelor's in financial markets and I am on track to finish my CFA charter. So I have been in the investment banking business for the last 5 years with ITI Capital, which is the investment banking arm of the Sun Pharma family. So for my entire life, I've seen finance, and my family also has a finance background. Uh, During my journey at ITI, what usually came across is that I am raising money for people, but there's no real value that I'm adding to the system except for money and except for capital. A lot of times it happened that I would think that is there an opportunity to create jobs or a business, but the opportunity never really came by. But when Everest came by, I joined Everest around 2 years back. So it gave me an opportunity to become an entrepreneur per se and have the opportunity to create jobs on a large scale as well as be a part of something exciting which is growing very fast. So it's been 2 years for me at Everest now. And coming to Everest fleet per se, so Everest was started in 2016 by Siddharth Latsaria. So our initial journey was very small with 2 cars, which was an experiment to venture into the ride hailing business. As most of us are aware that in 2016, Uber, Ola, and all the aggregators were on the peak of their spending spree. So the only word that people knew and associated with Uber was incentives and money being thrown out at drivers as well as small car owners. But the real matter at hand was that there was no one focusing on asset utilization, that the asset could actually generate the kind of money that an asset, if efficiently run, what kind of money or what kind of utilization that the asset would come by. So what we initially started off with was that we thought that let's experiment with a pilot, let's put up 2 cars, figure out how the entire thing works. So we did various pilots, right? So we did a single shift model, we did a double shift, but then what we realized was that uh, there is a 24-hour demand available and there is a platform which is creating this demand. So why don't we go out and utilize the platform to create a large utilization of assets and the cars can be run efficiently. So Uber has been a partner to us since our initial days. So 2016 onwards, Uber has been extremely supportive with us. And what they've helped us do is that they've helped us do these small pilots, which has now become a business model which is successful and scalable. So as Everest, from 2 cars, we've come all the way up to 720 cars. The idea and theme behind this continues to remain the same, that we want to focus on asset utilization. We want to maximize the efficiencies. And our main goal as a company is to create maximum jobs as well. So that is something that we are ensuring by doing this double shift model and creating a large number of jobs. So as we are speaking, we are launching into Delhi right now. Everest is already present in Bombay and Bangalore. Uh, our plan is to add another 1,000 cars in the next 12 months. And so far, the journey has been great for every one of us involved. And we hope that we reach the 1,000-car goal that we've set for ourselves in the next 12 months.
Perfect, great, Shivang. It's when we started Grip, it was always a thought that, you know, I think all of us in 2016, 17 thought, wish we could lease a car to Uber, right?
Yeah.
And can you find, buy a car, put it, find a driver. So when we did the first transaction with Everest in January, it was, it was one of those moments where you felt, okay, this is what we had an idea about, and this is what happened because of the partnership with Everest. So excited to have you on and to do our second transaction with the Everest fleet. Abhilash, over to you. You do a very different business, different stage of business. Would love to hear what WeGot does. And I think especially while all of us understand cars, talk to us about smart water meters and what that means.
Okay. I mean, I was actually during this conversation or during what Shivang was saying, trying to see was there anything that's similar. I mean, and there is absolutely nothing that is similar. Like mobility, water is also another problem that is begging to be solved. I mean, and at some points it's even beyond saving. So that's how we thought about this. I went to college in the US. Anytime I opened a tap, good quality clean water was available, and I was responsible because I started paying for my own water. Right? We have that concept with electricity. We don't leave our ACs on all the time because we know at the end of the month there is a bill that's going to come. We don't leave our lights on and leave the house. But with water, it's perceived as a free commodity. So there is no value attached to it, and therefore we are a lot more casual with it than we are with electricity. And personally, we felt this. I have three other co-founders. We've had times when people have had to leave the office because there's no water and that you use the KFC down the road to use the bathroom, right? And that is not a place that you want. I don't think you can attract talent with that, right? So we wanted to do something about it, and water meters have been around for 50, 60 years, but inherently there are some challenges that they do not solve. I'm not going to get into the very technical piece of it, but it basically leads to about 30% inaccuracy in data, which is also loss of revenue. So we wanted to build a device that gives you the cleanest possible data out of it factors in challenges that the traditional meter does not factor in, like air passing through. So normally how it works is water will pass through, you have a turbine that rotates, and then the counter on top tells you how much water is passed through. But it cannot differentiate between water or air. So that turbine will rotate irrespective of water or air, and your data is not accurate. Second thing that used to happen was water flows backwards. You close your tap, pressure is formed, and water flows backwards. But your counter only moves in one direction, like your odometer in your car. That is the only similar thing I can find, I think. But that's not the right data, because when it goes back and goes forward, you're getting counted for the same water multiple times. So again, your data is not accurate. And when you have very low flow, that is not enough velocity to this turbine. So we wanted to overcome all of these data challenges. Uh, and then we built this using sound waves. So we built this, and then we built a lot of applications around this. So that was just the tip of the iceberg as far as getting people conscious. But then there was no data available as far as how much water your tanker guy is giving you, or is the quality of his water good, how efficiently your STP, your infrastructure, your sewage treatment plant, your water treatment plant, how much water do I have available, how much am I taking out of the ground. None of this is data that was available, and we made this available. So when we built all of this, the first thing that happened was people kept asking us, hey, okay, all this is good, but how much does this cost me? Right? Everybody will say, hey, great solution. But there's a difference between saying that and actually acting on it and paying for it, right? So we then fixed the model, and we said, okay, hey, let's go give this product for free, and it's a long-term solution. So obviously, when we do that, you need to raise money, and it's always a cash burn thing upfront, which is when we got introduced, and now hopefully with this we will be able to put this in the hands of as many users as possible. We've already impacted and saved more than 3 billion liters. We expect to save over 10 billion liters just this year alone. And yeah,
I
we
think
hope to reach more people.
that's a staggering number, right? It really, and you highlighted how important it is to save water to reduce consumption. But if you're able to save that much, I think that's just phenomenal.
Thank you.
And Abhilash, if you can just add, how do these water meters get installed? Like when a real estate company is building a project, is that when you come in and you start installing it in the pipeline of the building, or do you a project is ready and then you come in and you install it? How does it work? And I don't want to make this too technical, but just to give a flavor of what that means.
Yeah. So this was something that we battled with early on, because when people ask me who is your user, it's literally everybody who uses water, but there's no way you can focus on anything by saying everybody who uses water is my user, right? So we basically segmented this as two main categories, and then within that, 3 or 4 categories. So the two main categories are new buildings or existing buildings. The device is the same, the installation is the same, but how you approach that is different. And from a finance point as well, how you approach it is different, because an existing building exists. You just go deploy and you start seeing revenue immediately. For a new building, you have to wait till the developer builds it, hands it over, people start using it to start realizing revenue. So those are the two broad categories. And we don't do B2C, we don't do individual homes. Right now, we are in talks with a company to become a national distributor for this, but that is something we don't do right now. And then within that, there are different use cases. A residential apartment looks at water differently, a commercial tech park looks at it differently, a hotel looks at it differently, an industry looks at it differently. So we've customized each of these applications based on what all of their needs are. And we approach each of this. So basically, we're selling a problem to each individual user, right? So our platform also looks different for each individual user.
Understood. And I want to link this, also to your investors. And you talked about capital raising. As I understand it, both Prestige and Brigade, which are very large real estate companies, especially in South India, are investors in VGOT. And what does that mean for you in terms of deployment in their buildings? Is every Prestige building got a VGOT solution now? Is that how it is?
So I'll actually just so they are two of our investors. So the way we've gone about raising money is we've added people who add a lot of strategic value. So the first company was HDFC Capital, and this is a big deal because HDFC stands for Housing Development Finance Corporation, right? So and they finance, I don't know, I would go out on a limb and say between 15 and 20% of India's real estate. So if you are validated by somebody who finances that volume of India's real estate, it gives us credibility about the solution, and B, it also gives us the GTM to go into all of their projects that they're financing. Then we have large real estate players like Prestige and Brigade also. And the third partner is more of technology partner. This is GoFrugal. Uh, GoFrugal also is owned by Kumar Vembu. The family that owns Zoho. They all started Zoho together. Brothers started Zoho together. So we build on technology. We lean on them for technology support. Now, as far as our investors, so HDFC, I already said, wherever they finance, we will hopefully be in those projects that they finance. With Prestige and Brigade, since they're investors, all of their new projects will end up having our solution. Scale is very large. I mean, Prestige is not just in South India; they're also doing a lot of work in Bombay right now, and it depends on who you ask, but they will say either Prestige is number one or Prestige is number two, and DLF is number one. So it gives us a lot of there's a lot of inventory that they carry, and their vision is so big that if we end up doing just their projects, the scale of the company changes automatically. Brigade is also a very large developer with a lot of large projects in the pipeline. They've launched a few very large projects also very recently. So we will end up we've already done multiple projects with them, and we've already shown them what this product can do. So we will work on adding more projects of all of these clients. These clients, it's already a given, but when the thing that happens is when you have companies like Prestige and Brigade on your client list, it's a signaling effect because all the other large developers will say, hey, I think it's something that can work for us as well.
Absolutely. No, what excited us, if I could just add, was it's a proven solution. The fact that you're deployed across some 30,000 homes, 4 million square feet in real estate, saved 3 billion liters. It's a new technology that
40.
you have built. 40 million square feet. It's clearly proven. The fact that you've got this stamp of approval and capital from people like HDFC, Prestige, Brigade, I think that's another huge confidence booster. And to me, the last part is once your water meter is deployed, there is no reason to take it out, right? It's a proven solution. It's going to give you that data, and there's no reason for you to be removing it and replacing it. So as we think of leasing the asset, that gives us tremendous amount of comfort.
So I'll talk about. So I'll give you some anecdotal information about how this model came out even. So when we first started, we said, hey, you know what, we need to be careful. We're giving the product for free. You pay us a monthly subscription fee. So we will recover our money only in X time, and then we will see a profits. It's all backloaded. Typically, SaaS businesses are backloaded in money revenue generation. So we started out with a 7-year and a 10-year contract. But very, very quickly, there was not even a single person who asked us to say, hey, okay, we don't want this, right? Because it's a very straight, it's not rocket science. I mean, there is complexity in building this and eliminating the challenges, but it is not rocket science. You cannot think of a house without an electricity meter, and you shouldn't think of a house without a water meter, right? And what it does is, especially if you live in residential apartments, the first thing that you will hear is, I have only 2 people, they have 5 people, but my bill is the same, right? This levels the playing field. You pay as per your consumption. Nobody is, imagine now we've gotten you from paying 1,000 rupees a month flat to 200 rupees because that's how much you're using. When will you ever decide to go back to paying 1,000 rupees?
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's physically, mentally, psychologically not possible for us to. The only time that it will have to happen is if there is a technology upgrade in 7 years. If the sensor fails, we replace that. That's part of the program. But otherwise, as long as the solution works, there is no removing us from a project. What that also means is the lifetime value of every consumer is extremely high for us.
Absolutely. No, perfect. No, great to hear. And I want to come back to you and talk about how Grip plays a role in that business. But Shivang, connecting the dots here, running cabs is also a very commonly done business, right? As is putting a typical water meter or any kind of IoT device. But what stands out for Everest is the efficiency and the utilization you deliver in running cabs, right? And basis as well, while most shared mobility providers are still probably 40-50%. So if you can talk about what are some of the key ingredients to success for Everest, what differentiates you, and maybe also some light on the Uber program, because obviously that's a key part of your strategy.
So this year's honestly been a very, very surprising year for all of us. As so in general, it's been a surprising year. So, but what we've seen is that why people come to Everest is a couple of reasons. One is that see, we have to understand the people running the company are not people like us. It's the drivers who are running the company, and the comfort that people get when you provide them with a certain level of service, a certain level of training, and a certain level of earning stability is what drives us to people like Everest. And Everest by far does it in the most efficient manner because of the sheer scale that Everest is growing at. That is one. Second is we have the lowest cost of purchasing in the industry right now, which helps us make a better return on our investment. So essentially, what happens is that the return that we make on the investment, a part of the return is being given to the drivers. So if you look at a driver per se, we are paying them at least 5 to 10% better earnings than what they would have made working for an Uber or an individual partner or on their own. So earnings is one critical aspect that goes there. Second is the softer skills that Everest works on. So what we typically do is before a driver is onboarded onto our platform, we make them go through a rigorous training session where they are explained how to navigate through the city, how to use the Uber application. Along with that, the softer aspects of the business as well as how to treat your customers. A big part of our culture is that we want to educate these people that how they make money via tips, how they make money via the softer skills, which no one really focuses on in the general fleet business or in a general taxi business. So that's something that really helps us. Second is the deep connection that we make with these drivers. So the connection that we have with them is that once you've given them a better earning, you've given them a decent car, and you've empowered them to make their own money, what next can you do for them? So what we do is parallelly we run a lot of programs for these drivers where we provide them with medical insurance, we provide them with doctor on call, and we do various other initiatives from time to time which keep these drivers engaged with us and indirectly on the platform. So the biggest differentiator here that we see here is that the way Everest has groomed its entire team to take up this to manage this driver profile as well as keep them happy, because it's a industry which sees a high level of churn. So if you have to retain a large number of people with stable earnings, you have to get you have to get all the check boxes ticking so that you are able to provide that level of comfort to the person who's driving the car, because driving a taxi is a tedious job. Typically, people are on the road for 10 to 14 hours. So at that point of time, if you don't have the right amount of support, right amount of training, then you will lose out on the driver in the middle of your journey only. So we've been able to retain a large part for drivers. And second is why we've able to come back so quickly. We have a large outstation driver set. So we provide these guys with free accommodation services as well. They come to the city, they make a higher living. It's uplifting their overall standards of living because their incomes have gone up by 40-50%. And second is we train the drivers to understand where the demand is coming from, what time they should go out, what they should do. So this really helps them be above the city. So typically on an average, even if you look at an Uber performance, Everest is at least 20-25% above what the city is doing. The basic reason behind this is that the training that goes behind the drivers and the effort that our entire team makes to make sure that once he's on the road, there is no difficulty he faces.
Oh, very fascinating. I mean, I think I found a common connect between your companies. It's the whole ecosystem, the benefiting the ecosystem. You're saving water, and I think you're uplifting the real resource that goes behind operating these cars. But Shivang, given that the asset is the car, and that's something that obviously our investors are more interested in, if you can talk about two things. One is your garage and how that helps utilization, and second is um, this asset obviously gets utilized quite intensively, right? You're running double shifts in the most cases. We're doing a 3-year lease term. What is the asset life to you? Is it 4, 5, 6 years? How do you make sure the asset lives that long?
So, so the biggest plus point that Everest has is that the entire operations are in-house, right from recruitment to our garage operations, and all the services are done in-house. So typically what happens is our cars end up doing between 8,000 to 10,000 kilometers a month. So what happens is the cars get serviced on a regular basis, which is a 30-day interval. During that 30-day interval, when the car comes into service, we rigorously check the car, make sure that the car is in a running condition. And second, the estimated life of the car in our model is 5 years and above. Now, the sole reason for this is that we end up spending at least 2 lakh rupees behind a car to maintain it over a 5-year cycle. So when we spend this amount of money in maintaining a car, essentially what has happened is that we have essentially refurbished the entire car so that it's as good as new. So there are cars in the city which are running with fleet. So obviously Everest is a 5-year-old company, so we don't have that history right now. But our first cars just finished their 4 years and they are still running fine. And we expect them to run for another 2 years. Second is that typically cab operators an individual cab operator runs his car for anywhere between 10 to 15 years. Uh, that being said, we run our cars on a double shift, but our quality of maintenance and the kind of spend we do behind the car to maintain it is also substantially large, which helps us maintain these cars to at least 5 years. So the reason we did a 3-year deal from the investor's perspective is that 3 years is something that the asset will be managing in an in a normal scenario. So even in a normal scenario, in a 3-year scenario, we'll be finishing 2.5 lakh kilometers, which is a very normal run for a Maruti car.
Understood. Okay, appreciate that. I'm taking one question which is related to the partnership you have with Uber. What happens if there is no Uber and Ola? Right? What happens to Everest Fleet? How does Everest Fleet think of that business situation?
So this is something I just read on the chat board as well. I think someone had posted it. So this situation came up during the lockdown when we thought that, hey, what if Uber doesn't get a license right now to operate? So what we quickly did at that time was that in last March, we pivoted to a corporate business model as well as launched an essential services model during COVID where we were doing B2C rides. So a taxi as a business is never going out of fashion or it's never going out of the market. It's a service that is required by most people to commute. So if an Uber does not exist, and in a scenario where there is no aggregator, there is a corporate demand, there is an employee transport demand, and there is a demand that we can generate on our own. So at a certain scale, so at a 500 car fleet during COVID, we were clocking around 3 to 4,000 trips a week, uh, generated through a microsite that we developed in 7 days. So if an Uber does not exist, we have already been through that during COVID because of the ban on the taxi aggregators during the lockdown that we had to manage for ourselves. So we pivoted our business model and there is an opportunity for us to pivot. But that being said, we will continue to focus on Uber right now. And if not Uber, then yeah, there is a corporate, there is a B2C, there is an own platform that we are planning to launch.
Understood. Okay. No, that's very helpful. Shivang, I'll come to the question that I think a lot of people have asked us, which is car is a commodity which most banks would give you financing for, right? And I know that you've taken bank financing for your current fleet of 720 cars. Why come to a platform like Grip? And I know you're also working with other investors, but why does taking financing from Grip make sense for you as a business?
See, as a business, our business objectives are to grow at a very fast scale. Typically, so in our history of Everest, we have doubled our fleet size every year. And from 2 cars, we are at 700 cars because of that. The funding appetite of a bank will slow down once the growth goes to a certain level and the balance sheet goes to a certain level. That being said, we are not debt averse. The first option that is usually there for us is a bank line. But what we want to do is, with this hyper growth, we want to explore different avenues for raising funds. We want to widen our investor base. And also, it makes a lot of sense for us to get feedback from people in the community, feedback from people who are investing in leasing deals, that how can we scale this business faster. More than the fund, it is about the connection that we make with people that will give us inputs and feedback that, hey, this is something you're doing wrong, or this is something that you're doing right and you can do it much better. So if I were to look at Grip as a platform or an HNI as an investment into Everest or investment into cars, it's going to be a small portion of our overall growth, just to widen the investor base and the funding base for us. So banks obviously make the most sense for us, but we will continue exploring this. And this is the first pilot we've done with you. So before that, we've never done this in the past. Uh, but what we see is that the risk that an individual investor or an HNI or a fund can take is much larger than a bank beyond a certain level to sustain growth.
Just if I can add my perspective, having worked with other mobility companies, um, I think there are 2-3 reasons we are seeing. One is what you mentioned on taking risk. The second is how that risk gets affected when you think of a high growth business, even though your balance sheet remains stable, right? I mean, I think you guys have an interest coverage ratio above 5. So you are, very, very strong even your debt equity ratio is fantastic. So I think while the credit remains good, but as we are thinking of building large aggregated platforms, whether it's in two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, I think banks have unfortunately not been able to transition to providing that kind of capital. Second is the obligations it creates on the promoter in terms of security. And third is, I think, a lot of cash flow matching, right? The assets that our investors are giving to you are immediately revenue generating assets and allow you to match your cash flow in that sense. At least that's the feedback that we have seen from a lot of investors, or from a lot of the companies we worked with.
Yeah, and like you rightly said, the appetite of the banks is also limited with the bad taste that they've got from individual car owners. So so as Everest, we have no issue raising debt on our books. We have no issue scaling up with bank funds. But in an event where we are seeing the banking system overall not lending too much, we don't want to be in a situation where growth is compromised, because the assets that we are buying through the money that we raise are revenue generating assets from the first day. So
Absolutely.
we have absolutely no issues in terms of servicing the debt or borrowing from the banks. But growth is something that we don't want to compromise on. At the same time, we want risk for everyone in the system to be at check. So we don't want someone to be in an uncomfortable situation while working with us. So there's a certain level of comfort that banks have. Let's reach that level of comfort. There's a certain level of comfort that investors have. We want to be a part of the ecosystem and be working with everyone and not just one party.
Fair enough. Okay. Point taken. Abhilash, the question for you, on leasing is very different, right? It's not about comparing bank debt to leasing, but really a change in the business model at your end. If you could just talk about why Grip makes sense for you and how you're thinking about changing and expanding your opportunity set through this capital.
So it's very similar to what Shivang said, because we also aspire to grow very quickly. See, like mobility is an absolute need, but conservation of water is not that, right? Now, if I have to get people to start thinking about it like that, I have to reduce the friction as much as possible for them to start absorbing this. So what we've done is just that. So we give the product absolutely free. I mean, we don't charge for anything, and we lease this product, right? So, and then we generate enough revenue from that to make sure that we cover our leasing costs as well. So, we've already seen, I mean, we've just launched it, but we've already seen that our sales cycles are starting to shrink. right? From maybe about 118 days per deal to very confident that it'll be under 30 now. So that's a significant reduction. So what that means is we get that many more deals, that many more users, that many more revenue generating devices out in the market. So the primary focus is for us also. We've got the validation, we've got the backing. Now it's just about getting the market as quickly as possible. So I think that's why Grip plays an important role, and we foresee that. I mean, this is our first pilot, but if this plays out the way that we expect it to play, then I think we will be consistently on this platform for all of our requirements in every month. And the other
That
thing,
sounds
like Shwan said, was also, so we've also explored all the financial different options. We've looked at venture debt as an option. We've gone to banks as well. We have different limits from different banks, but we've kept all of our options open. And in our scheme of things, going with something like Grip will help us drive down our sales cycle tremendously.
no, happy to hear that, and look forward to supporting the growth. On that note, let me pick up some of the questions that have come from the audience and pose them to you. I will ask the first ones for you. Um, who pays the monthly charge for a VGOT device? Is it something like a resident welfare association, or is the resident of that particular flat? And how do you calculate that payout amount?
So the answer for the residential segment is it's the Resident Welfare Association. Already in 30,000 homes, it's difficult for us to go knock on 30,000 homes to go ask them for money, and we don't want to run that risk. We facilitate everything between the facility. There's a managing committee mostly in all these resident welfare associations. Between them and each of the residents, we determine leakages, we generate bills, we'll make sure everything is done. But my client actually is the Resident Welfare Association, and it's like them paying for any other service. You want to get security. Let's say you have two an opening gate and an open gate and a closed gate, an entry or an exit, and you have two security guards at each of those gates. It's still a service that the Resident Welfare Association collects money from the residents and pays off to the vendor. It'll work exactly like that for us. That was your first question. So who's paying us? The second question was what?
How does the payout get calculated?
So it depends on the features that you choose. It starts as low as, well, actually with this model, it starts at 100 rupees per device, and that is it. So if you have a two-bedroom house, typically has two or three measuring points, which means that one for each bathroom and one for the kitchen. So that means about 200 rupees or 300. If it's three, it's 100 rupees per point. So 300 rupees per month per house.
Understood.
And this will cover everything, including part replacement, upgrades, apps, everything. There's
Got it.
no more that you pay for this.
Got it. Second question, Abhilash, for you is on the capex requirement for an apartment complex, which has say about 200 flats. Now, the apartment complex pays no capex, right, as per your business model. And I think the question is probably what is your capex requirement for something like this? So how many devices would you require for an apartment complex? Let's say two bedroom apartments and 200 of them.
Yeah, so I'll clarify a part. So I said there is
Sure.
no cost. So we don't charge anything, but there is a security deposit. I mean, it's a refundable security deposit that we charge.
Sure.
But beyond that, I'll break down those 200 apartments as well. So let's say there are all of them are two-bedroom apartments, and I'll assume that all of them have two bathrooms and a kitchen, and they're all independent lines. So that means there are three measuring points per house, and into 200 is 600 devices. What it actually costs us to install, deploy, the cost of the device, all of that is probably about 20-ish lakhs for 600 devices, about 3,500 rupees to 4,000 rupees.
Got it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me, Abhilash?
Yes, I mean, suddenly I got frozen.
No,
Yes,
we heard you.
about 3,500 rupees to 4,000 rupees. Depending on it's a little variable because it depends on the height of the building, depends on how many blocks are there, what the distance between each of the blocks are. So there is a little bit of a variable thing as far as wiring is concerned. But otherwise, in general, about 25 lakhs to 30 lakhs.
Got it. Understood. Okay. The next two questions, Shivanga, for you, but before I pose them to you, I just want to give some background to the audience. In the case of the transaction with Everest, this is actually a hypothecation of vehicles, right? So we are the total transaction size, 50% is for water meters and 50% is for vehicles. The 50% to water meters is a leasing transaction, while as the 50% for Everest is a hypothecation of vehicles, of new vehicles that are purchased from Maruti. Against this, there is a loan that is being provided to Everest, and hence it is not a lease transaction recorded on the books of Everest, and hence some of the questions are pertaining to comparison of loan and lease and would not be applicable to this specific transaction. Okay, but Shivang, I'm going to pose this question more generally to you. Is there a cost advantage of leasing versus taking a loan, and have you looked at that? And number two, if you were to lease, would you get a tax advantage?
Yeah. So the first question, so leasing is slightly more expensive than a bank loan, no doubt about that. But the benefit that we get with leasing is that we have to put up no upfront capital initially. So that helps us just expand quickly because we don't have to put up that 20-30% of merchant amount initially. And in terms of the cost, leasing is usually 8 to 10% more expensive than a bank loan over a period of 36 months. Otherwise, in terms of Everest perspective, it really doesn't make a large difference for leasing as well as bank loan, which is why we are open to exploring the product. On the second question for tax advantages for leasing, so the only advantage we have is that the cost of leasing directly goes into our expense sheet rather than going through a depreciation and an interest, which is a longer procedure. In terms of leasing, it directly hits my expense and I can get 100% of it in the 3 or 10 years that I'm doing it. Depreciation will be slightly longer because the policy that we adapt for depreciation is a 4-year policy.
Fair enough. And the only perspective I want to add is, some of this also comes down in the comparison between the GST rate and the depreciation rate. Certain assets which have a lower GST rate actually become more competitive for leasing than taking a loan. And if you have a higher depreciation, again, the advantages will vary depending on the period you're taking the depreciation under. In our experience, leasing electric vehicles is far more competitive than taking a loan for electric vehicles, but it's different when it compares to a traditional diesel, petrol, CNG vehicle because of the different GST that is applicable. Yeah. Perfect. I have another question, Abhilash, which is a little bit of deep dive, and I'll take it with you offline. I don't want to take it on the session, but we'll definitely come back to the investor with an answer. If I could just request the user to maybe send us separately his contact details, we'll happy to contact him. Gentlemen, thank you again for taking time. I'll just take a minute to contextualize the deal that we have on the platform, as it's combining two of your companies. We are excited about creating these opportunities which are very diversified, right? You have mobility on the one side with an Uber partner, and you have water management system on the other side, which is a hardcore real estate play and a hardcore real estate technology play. I think it gives an investors a very interesting diversification from a risk perspective, return perspective, and the ability to take exposure and learn from two very different business models. As a practice, we share on a monthly basis updates about all the leases that we work with, which gives you an opportunity to stay in touch with those businesses, learn more about them, and sessions like this, which you can hear directly from founders. We have the deal live on the platform. Do feel free to participate. Feel free to connect with your relationship managers or drop a line to us to ask any more questions that you may have, and we'll be happy to check back with Shivang and Abhilash on the same. Yeah. Once again, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure hosting both of you, and I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thanks, Nikhil.
Thanks, Nikhil. Thanks, Shivang. Nice meeting you.
Thanks, Abhilash.
Thanks, Vivek.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Abhilash. Thank you, Shivang.
Thanks, Vivek.
Thank you, Nikhil.